Remember this thing when you were a kid, huh? How many of you, it was like the ball pit was the best adventure ever? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I got passionate hands all the way in the back row. Yeah, come on. Because when you're a kid, and if you watch in the lobby after service, you're going to see this on some of the kids' faces. They're like, come on, Dad, just give me like 3 minutes in there, man. 3 minutes, that's all I'm asking. This is like an invitation to instant adventure. And if you're wondering if I took advantage of this little ball pit, you bet I did. You bet. I wasn't missing this opportunity. Are you kidding me? It was incredible. You know, as an adult now, one of the reasons I could do that is because I knew that these were brand new. You know, they'd been unused. Because the last thing you want to do is jump into a ball pit and find one of these in there. You know, it's like, oh, yeah. Or like, you get a hair on your face or like a used Band-Aid or, you know, it's like, come on. Why is it that WebMD has to ruin everything in our life, okay? It doesn't matter what's going on. You could put the sky is blue and it's going to come back to you with, like, if you put in ball pit, WebMD says there's more bacteria in here than on your toilet seat. And then you're like, I can't even look at a ball pit ever again. I mean, this is amazing. And that's kind of the way life goes, isn't it? I mean, think about when you were a kid, what were the biggest issues that you had? I mean, when you try to think back, as an adult, we laugh. We're like, well, whatever issues we thought we had, they weren't real issues, you know? It's like, and we say this to our kids, and you don't even have to be a parent. Just be around spaces where children are for 5 minutes, and you're going to know what their biggest issues are. Mom, when am I going to have a snack? When am I going to have a snack? When am I going to have a treat? When am I going to have a snack? You know, they can fit 1 million of those in 1 minute. It's impressive, you know. It's like, the other thing is, when are we going to have fun? And that is cloaked in screen time. Friends are coming over. When can I go outside? When can I play? And then another potential issue that they have as they get older is homework. It's like, oh yeah, my life is miserable because I got homework today. And you're like, oh man. Whoo, I got some work to do to prepare you for real life. Because when you get older, these issues, it's like they multiply. That's what I want to talk about over the next few weeks. What is the one thing that if it changed, would change everything in your life? What is that for you? I mean, are you like Todd's story, the video story that you heard a minute or so ago? And it might not be rowing for you specifically, but you've got news about one thing. You had one event take place in your life and it changed everything for you. It's like life stopped. Is that where you're at today? Maybe you're sitting there and you were listening to Todd's story and you were like, man, I wish that was my only issue. Because it's like you have a bin full of issues that follow you around to job, to relationship, to your family, to in your everyday life. What is the one thing? You know, we asked you to tell us what issues you are facing, and many of you replied back. And it was things like, I don't have enough energy. I feel drained all day long. A group of you, a large group of you said, I just don't feel like I have enough time. How many of you wish you could just have one more hour in the day? It's like, yeah, if I could just have a little bit more time. Yeah, I mean, let's be real. We're all kind of there, especially in different seasons, especially in this season. Many people said, I have issues with money. I have financial issues. Many of you said, I'm having relationship issues. Whether you're single, you're married, you have a family, it's a son, a daughter, a sibling. There's some drama in your life. And a surprising number of people said, man, we have some mental health issues. We, as a community, man, we need to give some voice to this. And so we're going to take some time to talk about the issues in our life. Why? Because, you know, the truth is, I'm not like a guru. I'm not standing in front of you without my own issues in my life. I don't profess to have all of my issues resolved, but here's what I found. As I have found that this environment, this community has provided so much help for me and for some of the issues that I face in my life and in our family since I first started attending in 1999 to now. And so what you're a part of is pretty significant. In fact, in the Bible, there are some verses that kind of give voice to this that we're going to be kind of leaning into over the next few weeks that I want to look at for just a second. We call it a theme verse, and it says this. It says that we should look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Part of our mission and our role is to look after each other. It's to help each other with the issues that we face, whatever those issues may be, so that we don't miss this grace of God in our life. You see, we believe that the most important step that you can take, that anyone can take, is receiving God's grace in your life and learning how to live out of that each and every day. That isn't like a checkbox, oh yeah, I said that prayer once and done, now I don't have to think about it anymore. No, this is a way in which we don't just know about God, but we know Him personally, the way that you would know a close friend. And so we need to look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. And this is what it practically looks like in our life. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up, troubling you, corrupting many. Because that's what an issue does, doesn't it? It produces bitterness in our life. We get bitter, and then it troubles us. And the more that issue is left unresolved, it starts to corrupt the relationships and the people that we have in our life. That's the way these issues go. And the key is to remove the root of bitterness. Not just the issues when they come. The bottom line for the next few weeks is this. And if you're taking notes, I'd encourage you to write this down in the note sheet that you were provided when you came in. The theme for the next few weeks is identifying the real issue is the fastest way towards real solutions. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, that's pretty obvious. It is obvious. The challenge is, it's a little bit more difficult than you might think because failure to find the real solution, failure to identify the real issue, almost always guarantees failure to find the real solution. So here's what that means. If you have the same issue over and over in your life, if you keep complaining about the same thing in your life over and over and over again, then potentially you've missed what the real issue is because you keep bringing the wrong solutions to the wrong issue again and again and again. So we're going to be talking about whatever issue it is that you're facing, big or small. I am so glad that you're here. You made a great decision in being here today. Because here's why. Talking about your issues, our issues, is tough. We like talking about everybody else's issues, don't we? That's what we do on social media. It's like, can you believe what they did, what she said, what he's been up to? Isn't that one of the reasons why people watch The Bachelor? It's like, man, that girl's got issues. And so if that girl's got issues, then maybe I don't have to think about my issues in my life, or whatever. Suddenly the problems that we have seem like nothing compared to what the drama that we see on reality TV. It's easy to talk about other people's issues. It's tough to talk about ours, and it's even harder to find helpful solutions. And so we're going to spend the next few weeks looking at a few of those areas where we need some help. And today we're going to talk about how. How do we identify the real issue in our life? And we're going to look at a story from Jesus' life where he's going to help us do that, believe it or not. And so before we get into that, I want to invite you to do what I normally do every week. Invite you to take a deep breath with me and just, okay. And even if you're not that spiritual or you're not sure where you're at with church and with God, I believe the next few minutes will have some practical stuff for you if you create a little space to set aside some distractions and receive what you're about to hear, receive what God wants to give you. And so will you make that your prayer with me right now? God, thank you for every person that's here. God, I pray that you would bless their life for taking a little time to invest in themselves personally and spiritually. And so help us set aside distractions and receive what you have for us and use me in any way that you can over the next few minutes. And we pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks. Thanks for praying that, and thanks for being here at whatever campus you're at. And I know there are people who watch online as well. In fact, this past week, I heard about Annette. She is at Myrtle Beach. She watches every weekend online and loves this place. I heard about her from somebody that knows her from the Findlay campus. And then the Thomases watching from South Carolina. And we have people who watch in Rhode Island. So here at Perrysburg, I need your help. I want you to put your hands together to welcome everybody who's watching online right now. You just say thanks and say hello. And that was a little warm-up for one of the things that we're celebrating this weekend. This is the first time that this has happened with me as lead pastor. I've been a part of many of them, but Cedar Creek launched its 6th campus this weekend in Oregon, Ohio. We may even have a few people watching because we had over 800 people join us for our campus launch. Will you put your hands together for that? We are celebrating that. It's pretty crazy. 2 services, and it was packed house. And so if you're tuning in, if there's a small group and they decided to add on a service, we're so glad that you're joining us, especially those of you who are here for the first time. It's a big weekend for us. So today, let's talk about how do we identify the real issue, the root issue in our life. Now, for some of us, this may be intuitive, but one of the easiest ways to do this is by not freaking out about the first issue that you see. Okay, some of you you need to write that down. It's like, okay, because that's what we do. And the issue comes along, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened. And so to illustrate this, last weekend, my wife and I celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary, which we're excited about. Thank you. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking you're only 20 years old. I know. Thank you so much. That means a lot. The truth is, if I could take just a quick second, there are a lot of voices who complain that marriage ruins romance and your sex life and all of that stuff. And the truth is, that's not true. It's not marriage that ruins that. It's probably an unhealthy relationship to begin with. And when you end up, and this isn't true for everybody, and changes can happen. And I know some of you have had some challenging experiences in this area, but man, what we don't hear is enough voices saying, man, marriage can be life-giving, especially when you work it out God's way. And so, man, I'm super thankful for my wife, and the 17 years, it's gotten better as we've gone along. So, last Sunday, it was our 17th wedding anniversary. We had a date night planned. I'm excited. I'm finishing up a few things in the yard, and my wife comes walking out with this look on her face that says, I need you to come inside right now. Followed by the words, I need you to come inside right now, okay? So there's some issues, right? So I take a deep breath because I've been in work mode, and I'm excited about our date and our time together later on. And I'm thinking, okay, which of the kids is causing my wife problems now? And I don't want to overreact. So I'm going to be calm, Dad, and I come walking into the house, and there are 2 kids playing quite nicely together on the floor, and we come around the corner, and our other 2 kids are actually being diligent about their homework, and I think to myself, oh, crap, what's the issue that she needs me to see? And we walk into the living room, and she points up to the ceiling in our living room that has water leaking from it into a bucket on the floor, and she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, I didn't plan this. I didn't want this on my anniversary. I mean, nobody wants this. Now, we have an issue, clearly, in our house. It's obvious. Now, there are a few options. Option number 1 is you could do nothing about it. You could sit there and look at the issue and go, well, let's just pretend it's not a problem and that it'll take care of itself, right? Because that's what some people do. You're like, amen, brother, I would do that with that issue. It's like, just ignore it. Maybe it'll dry itself up, right? And we do this in our life. We do this in life with some of our issues. We just put on a smiley face and pretend it's not really a problem. We hope that everything will get better, and the issue just keeps coming back. It gets worse if left undealt with. That's option 1. Option 2 would be to start poking around in the ceiling. It's like, what, I think we're gonna poke at this. I know some of you don't know who MacGyver is, and that's a real tragedy. Right? That's a real tragedy. But we could pretend that, MacGyver says that duct tape fixes everything. So you could just put duct tape right up there and just, we're going to cover that thing up, and we're going to quick fix to the first issue that we see. And we do this. There's all sorts of articles all over Google, 3 things that can get rid of any issue in your life. And we start to apply those to our lives. And it may work for a minute, but the leak comes back. The water comes, the problem, the issue doesn't go away. How do you fix these kinds of issues in your life? What my wife would say is you call a plumber, or you try to tackle it yourself. So let's imagine we would call a plumber. What would they do? They would come in and they would start asking better questions. They would ask diagnostic questions like, what is above the dripping ceiling on the 2nd floor? And the answer would be a bathroom. And so instead of ignoring it and instead of working there, they would go up to the bathroom to investigate where the real issue is. And Jesus was a master at this. In fact, if you've never really read any of the accounts of Jesus' life, I would encourage you to go home and pick one of them. Mark is the shortest. And so just go through and look at how Jesus would get to the real issue so fast. In fact, he was so good at it, people loved him for it, and they hated him for it. And so I want to look at one of those stories right now. It was written by one of Jesus' closest disciples. His name was John. You can follow along in your notes or on the screen right here. It says, afterward, and what happened before doesn't really matter for the story that we're looking at today. Afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Most biblical historians believe it was Pentecost, which might not mean a whole lot to some of you. It was after Passover. It was a kind of 1-2 holiday season that was big time. So everybody would come back to Jerusalem. That means Jesus would leave Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, and some of the communities there, and he would take a couple days' journey down to Jerusalem. So inside of the city, Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, which is one of the gates around the temple, the holy place in the holy city, there was a pool of Bethesda. And this is important because when you travel, before you go into the temple, you want to clean up a little bit, the travel, dirt, the dust, prepare yourself, freshen up, fresh water, all of that stuff. And so it had 5 covered porches, and crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, would lay on the porches. Now, there was this superstitious belief that an angel would show up and stir up the pool. It was most likely an air bubble that would kind of bubble up. And the first one into the pool after that would be given a miracle. They would be cured and they would be healed. And so people were waiting for God or for the angel to show up so that they could experience healing. One of those people who had been waiting, he had been waiting there for 35 years. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38. I said 35, 38 years. That's how old I am. That means he was older than me, most likely, and for my whole life, all he has known is being seated by that pool with a significant issue. What I want to pay attention to is how Jesus responds to this. Now, before we go there, I want to help paint the picture. And so I want to take you to the archaeological remains of the pools of Bethesda today. Let's watch. Welcome to the Pool of Bethesda, or in Hebrew, Bethesda. That means home. The Beth means home, and this is home of good deeds. Bethlehem means house of bread. The Pool of Bethsaida means the house of healing. This was one of the main freshwater sources for the city of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. And so this would be the collecting place of people who were sick, people who had wounds, people who needed fresh water, people who needed healing. And so it's no wonder when Jesus comes to this place, he finds people not at their best. This would have been a place of hope and help for minor things, but in John chapter 5, we're reminded that Jesus encounters somebody who has been sitting here for 30 plus years. 30 years unable to walk, 30 years unable to find the healing that he needs. And on this particular day, Jesus changes his story forever. Just see the architecture, there's pools down there, the 5 arches. This would have been a significant place for an average, everyday, ordinary Jew, but Jesus turned this into a miraculous place because that's what Jesus does. He provides hope, help, and healing, and so perhaps that's part of the reason you're here. Or maybe you've had a moment in your life where you feel sick, where you need help, where you need good deeds or healing. Jesus invites us to call out for him, to meet him in those places, and then trust that he can do the impossible in our life. One of the powerful things about visiting Israel is it takes what you can only use your imagination for and it brings it to real life. It helps move the stories that sometimes feel like fairy tales into reality. Now, here's what I know about some of you. Even when you hear the stories of the miraculous works that Jesus has done, it's hard for you to receive any of it because it's not scientific. It doesn't seem possible, plausible, doable. It's remarkable. And that is what a miracle honestly is, even for those days. And so if that's where you're at and that's a part of the story that you're struggling with, I believe that if somebody can predict their death, their burial, and their resurrection, they can probably do a few miracles as well. But just, I would ask you, just set aside the miraculous and let's look at what Jesus says to this man in this moment. Because I think beyond just the astonishing miracle, there's some practical things here that have value. Let's look at it again. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him and knew that he had been ill for a long time, how did he know? Jesus was about 30 years old. And every year he would take multiple trips to Jerusalem. And at those trips, most likely, he would be going to the same pool, that primary fresh water source, to get fresh water, clean up before he goes into the temple. And so every year he comes, he sees this recognizable man sitting there by the pool, whatever his name is, Jim. Every year he would see Jim. And so he knew that he had been sick for a long time, and he asked this, what seems like, ridiculous question. Would you like to get well? I mean, he's seen him there every year, and it's like, hey, do you want to feel better? No, I just like the view at the pool. But I mean, it's like asking a Browns fan, do you want to beat the Steelers today? Yes. Or maybe more recent, the Michigan fans, do you want to beat Notre Dame? Go Irish. I know. I had to fit it in there somewhere, okay? I'm really glad that you're here because you have issues, so. I didn't say that any other service, so. Welcome to the 12:30 crowd, right? After Notre Dame's game yesterday, they have issues too. All right, so here's what the man says back. He says, I can't. Jesus says, do you want to get well? And he's like, he doesn't say yes. He doesn't say, Captain Obvious. He says, I can't, the sick man said, for I have no one to put me into the pool. And when the water bubbles up, someone else always gets there ahead of me. I can't. No one else seems to be able to help. Everyone else has. Have you ever found yourself saying those same things when it comes to the issues in your life? I mean, if you were to talk to the man right now, what would he say his issues are? I can't move. No one else seems to care. Everyone else seems caught up in their own stuff. I can't, no one else, everyone else. And these become what we think are the issues in our life. And we become consumed by them. It's some of these things that become our primary excuses in our life that keep us from seeing the real issue. For example, last week, after we successfully diagnosed that the issue was that there was a compromise in the toilet seal, I took it upon myself to try to fix this problem on Labor Day. While all of you seem to be doing so many wonderful things, I was on my second and then third trip to Lowe's. Yeah, I've got issues, right? And you know what? As I'm working my way through this issue, and it's not resolving as quickly as I had experienced in the past, what is the voice saying in my own head? Oh, I can't seem to fix this. I can't get it right. And I'm playing the victim. Nobody else can help because everyone else is having so much fun. And I'm just having I mean, have you ever done this? Maybe it's just me. Maybe you're better at this than I am. Here I am having a pity party, and I'm walking into Lowe's for the third time, and I'm walking out, and of course, as God would have it, somebody from Cedar Creek is there, seeing me with my serious eyes, and they're like, how are you doing today? I'm okay. I've got a bit of a toilet issue, and I'm not really happy about it, whatever. I'm trying to be kind and polite, but to the point so I can get back, and she's like, well, some days I just have to decide that it's good to be alive. What do you say to that? Good point. Yeah. Shut up, It's like, I don't want to talk about that. It sounds like something a preacher would say at church, Walking out to my car, and you ever have those moments where it's like you got that voice in your head because you're working on a talk for someone else, and it's like, Ben, I was like, you're going to talk about what's the real issue. And, you're not supposed to respond to the voice in your head, but I can't help myself. I just think back, shut up, As you start to drill into this, the bottom line is, I'm just upset that I don't get Labor Day to do whatever I want. Now suddenly Jesus' question doesn't seem so offensive. it seems like the most important question we can ask when it comes to our issues. Jesus asks, do you want to be well? If you're taking notes, I want you to write that down. Do you want to work on your issue, or do you just want to complain about it? Do you just want to tell everybody why you can't and why no one else and why everyone else? Because if you're like me, sometimes that's really what I'm doing with the issues in my life. I don't really want to do anything about them. I just want to complain about them because, gosh, I wish I didn't. And then we get stuck there, not really addressing the real issue. In the original language, another way of thinking about this question is, are you willing to do anything about this? Are you willing to be well? Are you willing to take issue with your issue? Because if not, stop complaining about it. Stop telling everybody why this is an issue in your life if you're not willing to do something about it. Are you willing to be well? I think that's what Jesus asks each of us when it comes to the issues in our life. Charles Duhigg, New York Times bestselling author, wrote a book called The Power of a Habit. And he said that our lives are typically built up of sequential habits that deliver the same kinds of behavior over and over again. And if you can trace them back to a keystone habit and address that habit, suddenly it can change the way that you live. Here's what he discovered. He says, dozens of studies show that willpower, willingness, is the single most important keystone habit for individual success. What's he saying? He's saying that your willingness to do something different, willpower isn't something that you have or that you don't. It's a muscle that you can develop, and your willingness to do something different may be the most significant keystone habit that you can develop in your life. Are you willing? Now, I'm not at all suggesting that Jesus is just giving a self-help talk on how you need to muster up more of your own strength to tackle your issues in our life. No, I think faith plays an important part in this, but faith is oftentimes confused with a feeling where it's like, oh, I feel God doing something in me and I feel better about this. No, faith is not a feeling. It's a willingness. I put it this way. It's your willingness to trust God and take a step instead of trying to do it your own way. Instead of trying to do it alone, I'm going to go, okay, God, where do you want me to go? And I'm going to take a step. And I think that's what happened on this particular day. Because Jesus told the man, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. This is obvious. This is what the man is kind of wanted to do, but in this context, instantly the man was healed, and he picked up his sleeping mat, and he began walking. Jesus says three simple phrases that are all action-oriented. Let's look at those right now again. He says, stand up, pick up, and walk. I think if you have some issues, Jesus today, his first question is, do you want to do something about it? Do you want it? Do you want it to be well? And if so, I want you to write these three phrases down in your notes. Stand up, pick up, and walk. I want you to think about that. Stand up, pick up, and walk. If you have an issue that you want to deal with, how do you identify them? You learn how to stand up, pick up, and walk. In fact, at all of our campuses, I want you to say that out loud together right now. Stand up, pick up, walk. One more time. Stand up, pick up, walk. When you're trying to help somebody with their issues, you want to think through stand up, pick up, and walk. What do I mean by stand up? Think about what is involved in standing up. In the original language, it's rise up, it's wake up. In other words, it's change your perspective. Instead of looking at things the way that you always have, we're going to change our perspective on the issue in order to identify the real issue. Instead of looking at everything the way that we've always looked at it, the way we've been trained to look at it, the way we've been stuck here for 38 years, we're going to ask another voice to help us change our perspective on the issues in our life. The second thing that Jesus says is to pick up your mat. Now, this is interesting because the mat, the best example that I have of what the mat looked like is it was more like a straw mat. It doesn't look very comfortable, but it's what would separate you from the dirt beneath you. And so think about this, right? This is the mat that's been laying on the ground. This man has been laying on this mat for 38 years. Now, if you had a bed sheet that you've been laying on For 38 years. Yeah, think of it that way. Would you want to pick that thing up and take it with you? Be like, I'll pass, It's practically dirt anyway. Why did Jesus ask him to pick up his mat and walk? Think about the significance of this action. Essentially, Jesus is saying, I need you to change your environment. Well, what does he mean by change your environment? I want you to hold the thing that is you have allowed to hold you. I want you to own the thing that you've allowed to own you. Instead of this being the thing that holds you up, I want you to hold it. Pick up that mat. Hold it. Change your environment. Now, this may mean you have to hold differently your schedule. This may mean you need to hold differently some of the ways that you've lived in the past. It means you may have to execute some changes to your environment. But man, that's how Jesus wants to help us deal with the issues in our life, so that we can, if we stand up, pick up, we can walk. And the Hebrew word for walk is live. It's to set one's direction. It's to change the path, the focus, the direction of your life. Stand up. Change your perspective, pick up, change your environment, and walk, change your direction. That is a powerful invitation that Jesus invites us into. And so over the next few weeks, next week we're going to talk about how to stand up, pick up, and walk when it comes to your time. If you have issues with time, come back. And yes, it may mean you have to change your perspective. You may have to change some of your routines. But I promise you there'll be some practical things that'll help you think differently about the issue of time, not having enough of it in your life. The week after that, we're going to talk about money. For people who are struggling with money, the reality of money. No, this is not a talk on how to give more money to the church. We're actually going to be giving money away to people at our physical camp. Now I got your attention. You're like, you're going to do what? What? Giving money away? When? Where? I don't want to miss that. That's right. At our physical locations, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be giving money away and talking about the practical ways we can stand up, pick up, and walk when it comes to our finances. After that, we're going to talk about drama. Jesus gives a crystal clear way how to approach drama relationally in our life. And then we're going to have one of the most unique services we've ever done on mental health, the last week of the series that you're not going to want to miss. Anxiety and depression, and how do we stand up and pick up and walk? Because I think that's what some of you need to hear today. Is instead of the I can't and no one and everyone else, instead of staying stuck there with what you think the issue is, Jesus looks at you and extends an invitation and a new way to live. And the reality is this isn't the end of the story for this man. In verse 9 it says, instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and he began walking. But, there's always a but when it comes to dealing with the issues in our life. Don't be surprised by the but. But this miracle happened on a Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders objected. A man who's been lame for 38 years can walk, and the leaders object? They said to the man who was cured, they didn't even acknowledge that he was cured, you can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry the sleeping mat. What? Let's get this right. The man who hasn't been able to walk is walking through the temple with his sleeping mat on the Sabbath, and they're like, sir, we have an issue here that needs to be addressed. And they're like, yeah, I'm walking. And they're like, no, you're carrying the straw mat. And the Sabbath explicitly does not allow you to do that. And even, in fact, today, if you go to Jerusalem or to Israel, on Saturday, the elevator goes to every single floor because it's work to push the buttons. You see, some people had taken the law to such an extreme that a man who had been obviously cured by God, they wanted to focus on this issue. Do you know what that teaches us? You know what this story reminds us? I think what Jesus is illustrating is when it comes to his way of life, when you stand up, pick up, and walk, you should expect resistance. That there are just going to be some people, when you try to live a different routine with your time, or a different budget with your finances, or a different resolve in your drama with the people in your life, or a different approach, a biblical approach to mental health, people are going to be like, oh, you're going to church now, huh? Oh, you think you're better than everyone else? Do they know what you were doing 2 months ago? It's like, oh, you think you're better at your time than me? Or, oh, you're too good for us. You're going to bed early. Oh, you slacker. You know what? People are going to start to bring up all sorts of stuff in your life. They're going to take issue with the fact that you are owning the thing that has been owning you, and you just need to not be surprised by it. Instead, look at how the man replies. He says, he replies with, "The man who healed me told me." The man who cured me, his instructions to me were to pick up your mat and walk. And their reply is, "Who said such a thing as this?" They demanded, and I love this, the man didn't know. He didn't even know his name. Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. He didn't know Jesus the way that we know Jesus today. And yet, he was allowing his voice. He had placed his faith in his voice. So when we're going to stand up, pick up, and walk, we've got to know whose voice we are following. Because culture is going to say all sorts of things around us. And you know what? You don't have to know everything about the Bible. You don't have to know everything about God. This man didn't. He just knew whose voice he was following, and he was going to pick up his mat and walk. So we got to know whose voice we're following. In verse 14, it says, Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, "Now you are well, so stop sinning." Now you're no longer bound by the sleeping mat. You're no longer categorized or defined by this. You are healed. You are whole. So stop sinning, or something even worse may happen to you. Now, at first, that sounds like a threat, right? It sounds like Jesus is saying, hey, you screw up again, you're out. I think what happens when we put that kind of tone on it is we bring our preconceived notions of God to that statement, and we miss that Jesus is really pointing out something that, if we're honest, is really obvious. I put it this way in my notes: don't let feeling better tempt you to drift back to old patterns. Because it's tempting. You come to church for a little bit. I've seen this happen a dozen times. It's like, oh, I feel a little better, got a little positive in my life. I think that issue is over. And we drift back into the same patterns with our time, with our money, with our relationships, with some of the rhythms in our life. And he's like, no. Just because you're feeling well, just because you're no longer defined by this, doesn't mean it's safe to go back to your old way of life. Stand up, pick up, and walk. Follow my voice if you want to be well. Are you willing? Because when we listen to Jesus' voice, Jesus changes everything. And you don't have to take my word for it. I want to take you back to Todd's story, and I want you to listen to how God's invitation to stand up, pick up, and walk has changed him.
I decided that at one point I will take my life. I wasn't sure when, but that at one point I was going to, because I felt like my purpose was over, that I had no more purpose, and because of that, why would I have a reason to live? I wrote letters to people that I loved, telling them I'm sorry for being such a huge disappointment. February 15th, that exact day, that night, I locked myself in my dorm room. I sat in the corner with the pills for my heart that was slowing my heart rate down, that was kind of controlling the symptoms that I had. And I decided that I was going to take my own life and overdose on these pills. And so I took one, and I took two, and I took three, and as I was about to take the fourth one, I just couldn't do it. Something was overcoming me. Something was overpowering me. I just couldn't. God was telling me something. God was telling me that there was more to life than just rowing, friends, popularity. I didn't know quite what the plan was for my life. I just knew that God had something more in store for me. I started reading my Bible, and it wasn't an overnight, like I read a chapter a day or anything like that. No, I read a verse maybe every couple of days. As time kept on going, I started reading a little more. I started wanting to know more about what this purpose was, and I started praying more, and God was in my life once again. When I finally got my heart diagnosis, I thought I had a physical heart problem and that was it, that my heart wasn't functioning right and that I could fix it on my own. Now, I realize that it was God telling me that I had to renew my heart for Him, that it was much more than just that physical problem, but it was something much deeper than that. I finally realized that the life in Oklahoma, everything on this earth, it's worthless. But what is worth living for is for God and for His kingdom. And this life ultimately turned into something that I wanted to live for.
At all of our campuses, if you could just tell Todd, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks, Todd. Todd now is a part of our internship program, allowing God to use his story to impact the next generation and also our whole church. Because if you're sitting there today and you've ever thought to yourself, maybe the best solution would be to end it all, stop. Jesus extends an invitation to stand up, pick up, and walk. If you ever find yourself wanting to just give up on all of it, Jesus extends an invitation for you to stop letting your issues define you and let His invitation into a new way to live begin to shape your life. For some of you, that's the reason you're here today, because you've drifted. You've drifted back into old patterns, and it's like, oh, I should probably get back to church and maybe even feel guilty being here. I'm so glad you're here. It's time for you to stand up, pick up, and walk. And there are some of you that are facing some challenges, some issues, some real issues. And don't get me wrong, one weekend service is not going to make them go away, but Jesus' words to stand up and pick up and walk can set a new direction for you, because Jesus can change everything. And so, man, let's lean into this journey. Let's help each other not miss the grace of God in our life. Well, let's work together to remove the root issues. Let's deal with the root issues instead of the excuses and the surface issues that get us stuck all the time, so that we can experience life the way that God intended. That's what it means to be the church. So that's my hope and my prayer for every single one of you. And I know there are some of you today who you've never taken your first step with Jesus, surrendering your life to Him. You see, we see Jesus now, unlike the man at the pool, we see Him for who He is and what He accomplished in history. As someone who left heaven and its perfection to stand up with us here on earth to help change our perspective on who God is and what God is really like, what His kingdom is really like. And not only that, He picked up the guilt, the hurt, the injustice, sickness, death Himself, and He took it upon Himself at the cross, and it killed Him. It took His life unfairly, unjustly, and just when the world thought all hope was lost, 3 days later, what did He do? He came walking out of the tomb alive to give us hope that with Him, it doesn't matter how dark it gets, it doesn't matter how challenging the issue, He knows how to overcome them all in our life. And so let's say yes to Him. And if you've never surrendered your life to Him, that is the word where it all begins. It's giving up and placing your faith, your willingness to trust Him instead of trying to do it all on your own. So if you've never taken that step, I want to give you an opportunity right now in the quietness of your heart. Make that your prayer. And if you need words, use these. God, today I surrender my life to You. I realize that You sent Your Son to help change my perspective on who You really are. And I realize He picked up the issues in my life, the sin, the hurt, the guilt, the injustice, the mess that I've made. And so I need Your forgiveness that only Jesus can give. And I want to walk with You from this day forward, because I see that Jesus came back from the dead. And I believe that that gives me hope to live a new life. I want to follow You from this day forward. Jesus, I believe that You change everything. And so thank You for changing me. In Jesus' name, amen.